Humans possess an instinctive reflex to hide internal flaws behind a facade of righteousness. This masking functions as a psychological defense mechanism. It is an internal barrier we construct to hide the reality of our own sinfulness from ourselves. This creates a foundational problem for personal growth. It is impossible to overcome a moral or spiritual flaw that a person cannot even identify. To address this, we must deconstruct the specific architecture of spiritual blindness, the exact mechanisms that prevent us from acknowledging our true moral state. Confronting self-deception is the foundational prerequisite for any genuine spiritual progress. Without an accurate view of our own reality, transformation is stalled at the start. We can analyze how this blindness operates by looking at a specific historical dataset, the biblical letters written to 7 ancient communities in Revelation. Even these deeply religious communities, comprised of people dedicated to their faith, consistently fell short of divine standards. Their failure was driven by internal pride and a lingering carnality that obscured their actual spiritual condition. In response to this blindness, the text issues a repeated mandate to every group. Across the entire dataset, the primary instruction is the command to overcome. If even highly praised religious communities suffer from systemic moral blindness, then this phenomenon is a universal human baseline rather than a rare exception. This model maps the architecture of that blindness, a 3-layered system of deception that locks the human mind in a false reality. The first layer is the external influence. Revelation 12:9 identifies a macro-level deceiver, Satan, who works to influence the entire world. The mechanism of this influence is subtle. As Corinthians warns, these deceptive forces do not appear as threats. They transform into angels of light. Because the deception presents itself as something righteous and positive, it avoids triggering our natural defenses. This creates a false sense of spiritual security, making individuals believe they are safe and aligned with God, even as they drift away. This first layer succeeds by disguising the enemy as an ally, effectively neutralizing the believer's awareness of any danger. The second layer of this architecture moves from the external threat to the internal mechanism of the human mind. Jeremiah 17:9 defines this internal saboteur as the deceitful human heart, a core part of the human condition that's difficult to truly know or trust. This aligns with the premise in Mark chapter 7. True defilement doesn't happen to a person from the outside, but proceeds from within the heart. Humans possess an inherent desire to view themselves as they wish to be, rather than as they actually are. Our internal mechanism actively rejects objective reality in favor of a fantasized, idealized version of the self. This internal wiring means we cannot trust subjective feelings of righteousness. Our own hearts conceal the truth of our condition. The third layer is the catalyst that binds the entire system together. This catalyst is spiritual pride and ego. When these 3 layers lock, the mind is effectively sealed within its own deception. Pride functions as the glue. It prevents the individual from acknowledging the external deception or their own internal corruption. Once these layers are secure, the individual is blind to their own moral reality. They become defensive, unteachable, and convinced of their own perfection. Pride is the ultimate barrier to transformation. As long as the ego remains protected, the architecture of self-deception remains an impenetrable fortress. We test this model against the 7 churches. This chart plots each community based on feedback. Some, like Laodicea, are severely criticized for lacking spiritual awareness. Yet even the most faithful, Smyrna and Philadelphia, received strict admonitions to evaluate themselves and overcome. This widespread critique proves that lingering carnality, the works of the flesh, exists in all human groups, even the most devout. Because of this internal struggle, groups can consistently lack faith, hope, and love, seeking to please the self before God. We cannot merely blame external forces like the devil. Our own human nature is equally responsible for these moral failures. This is why the command to overcome is universal. Regardless of their standing, every group is addressed with the same requirement. No level of perceived righteousness exempts a group from the three-layered system of self-deception. Vulnerability to this blindness is part of being human. Shifting from diagnosis to the solution, how do we begin overcoming this blindness? Subjective feelings are unreliable because the nature of self-deceit always seeks to cast us in the best possible light. The biblical solution is to use the word as an objective mirror, as described in the book of James. This requires an active, impartial comparison of our behavior against the text, rather than relying on our internal sense of security. Relying on status or a false sense of security is fatal to progress. The only path to truth is external, objective measurement against divine standards. Spiritual progress requires an active choice to stop hiding from our own shortcomings and sins. Acknowledging these internal flaws is the mandatory first step toward an honest transformation. To counter our individual blind spots, we must look to collective accountability. By supporting one another in removing these spiritual blinders, we can develop a true character modeled after Jesus Christ. Real progress is not found in achieving flawless perfection, but in a persistent, humble willingness to step into the light of truth and shatter the mask.